Call a meeting to order. Good evening. This is a public hearing. My name is Richard Stewart. I'll be chairing the public hearing tonight. I'm the Mayor of Coquitlam, and I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. It's a public hearing into the bylaws that will be introduced to you in a moment by the Deputy City Clerk. Councillor Reid has asked me to read this really quickly. Council for the City of Coquitlam has given first reading to these bylaws and has directed that a public hearing be held. This is what we're here tonight to hear from the public on these issues. Staff from the City's Planning and Development Department will first present a summary of each proposed bylaw. Well, there's actually only one, and the floor will then be opened to anyone that has anything to tell Council about the proposed bylaw. Those that have pre-registered will be given first opportunity to speak. I stress to you all that this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for anyone who has a view on the proposed bylaw to make that view known to Council members. Council members are here with an open mind, here to listen to your input. No one has prejudged the outcome of these applications, but there are some rules that Council has asked me to enforce. It's not a question and answer period. It's not an opportunity to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with either Council members or with members of the audience who might have a different perspective on the bylaw. So we ask each speaker to restrict their comments to the proposed bylaw, to be as brief and concise as possible. We ask speakers to respect a 5-minute time limit. You can speak more than once, but you have to get back to the end of the line. I ask that the audience be respectful of each speaker and allow that speaker to make his or her point without interruption. Please refrain from clapping, booing, cheering, any of the presentations made tonight. As chair of this hearing, I reserve the right to conclude any presentation that doesn't relate to the bylaw, that becomes abusive, or that becomes repetitive of views that the speaker has already made known to Council members. Please note that if you have any written submission that you want to be part of the permanent record of tonight's public hearing, you must hand that information in to the City Clerk at this desk prior to the adjournment of that item. After we adjourn an item, we can't receive any further information until the item has been concluded, either voted for or voted against. Please also note, we'll skip that part. Immediately following adjournment of the public hearing tonight, a regular Council meeting will convene in order that Council may give consideration to items on the public hearing along with other items on the Council agenda. However, if during the public hearing Council requests an item to be delayed, that we not consider it tonight, we will defer pending receipt of requested information. I'll now call on Ms. Lohr to introduce the bylaws on tonight's agenda and Planning and Development staff to make an introduction on the first item.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item and only item on this evening's public hearing agenda is Bylaw 4502-2014, which is an application to amend the City's zoning bylaw to amend the RS7 through RS11 one-family residential zones, which are primarily used in Northeast Coquitlam.
Your Worship and members of Council, my name is Michael Dhaliwal, Acting Supervisor, Development Planning. Item 1 is a zoning bylaw text amendment to the Northeast Coquitlam single-family zones. 3 issues have been identified and considered as part of this bylaw amendment. Number 1, the regulations are unclear in the zoning bylaw. Number 2, the siting of the front face close to the front setback line can be difficult on some sites. And number 3, side-facing garages are not permitted on large lots. The objectives of this bylaw are to create more flexibility in siting homes, provide greater clarity for the community regarding house design and siting, respond to the development community's concerns, the city's building department's input surrounding the clarity of the bylaw, and building street-friendly homes in steeper terrain and on windy streets. The following diagrams will illustrate the 3 main amendments that are being proposed. Number 1, staff are proposing to remove the regulation that requires 35% of the front home to be within 2 meters of the front setback line. So for example, if the setback is 4 meters, we require a portion of the house, 35%, to be within 4 to 6 meters right now in the zoning bylaw. What we're proposing is to change it so you no longer have to be that close to the street. Even though the setback is 4 meters, you can be sited 6.5, 7 meters away from the street, which we weren't allowing before. This would create greater flexibility on where you want to site your house and avoid impractical floor layout designs. Number 2, to clarify what portion of the house that needs to be 1 meter closer to the street. The intent of the bylaw was to require garages to be set behind a portion of the house. Right now, the bylaw is unclear, and people have been setting, in some cases, the garage in front of the front door. So what we're proposing is you can either set the front door and porch in front of the garage, or just your porch 1 meter in front of the garage. It's up to you as the developer. Number 3 is to allow side-facing garages on large lots, or RS10 and RS11 executive lots. Right now, we do not provide for this, and we've had a makeshift solution where people have started creating a habitable room, which is maybe used for storage, or they call a den, in front of the garage to create a side-facing garage. To resolve this issue and understand that on large lots that are 18 meters wide and have a lot of square footage, we'll permit side-facing garages and no longer need to worry about that workaround, which is not aesthetically pleasing in all cases. Other housekeeping amendments is to clarify how floor area is calculated, add consistent references within each zone to other sections of the bylaw, i.e. what the parking is or if there's a location of use requirement. Ensure that all setback tables are consistent within each zone. Right now, if you go to the RS7 zone or the RS9 zone, the tables are not laid out in a uniform pattern like all the other zones, like RS1, RS2, RS3. So we're just trying to make sure that's consistent. And this is to resolve hidden regulations where developers have difficulty searching through the bylaw and residents for what is actually applicable on their lot. The proposed amendments increase house siting flexibility and better recognize Brook Mountain's topography, improve clarity, and improve application processing times. Based on this, staff are recommending all final readings of zoning amendment bylaw number 4502/2014.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. McIntyre. This only includes the ground level, correct? A second story, that would you be allowed to build second story over the garage?
Through the chair, yes, this is dealing with the setbacks of the...
For the ground level only, but does it affect the second story of a house that there would be living space over the garage?
Those provisions would be the same as they are now. It would be up to the designer to configure that however they wish. But recognizing that, again, some of the building size regulations we have and some of the other setback for the second story, it gets that articulation where the ground floor, either the front entry and patio or porch, is at a certain location, and then typically the second story is set back a little bit from that.
Okay, so there would be some articulation. It wouldn't be just a flat front. That's what I don't want to see.
That's correct. Okay, yes. To put it most frankly, yeah, you wouldn't have a slab-sided house that would be 2 stories all right at that setback line.
Yeah, especially on the side one is the one I'm most interested in. Yeah. Okay.
If I may add, it's 85% floor area for the second story that remains.
Yeah, but on the side one, it doesn't change at all. It still wouldn't be articulated. It's just one big flat wall. There'd have to be something that faces the street that looks decent.
That's correct, through the chair. Again, those provisions are in the zoning bylaw around the building size regulation we talked about this afternoon at the council and committee.
Yeah, so we're not changing any of that.
None
okay,
of that,
that's
no.
all I wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Okay, and I had some questions, actually. Mr. Dhaliwal was just explaining, in fact, I had a drawing that showed that the option could be for the front porch to extend forward of the plane of the garage door, and I'll say that deliberately because the way it's written isn't less confusing, I don't think, than it used to be. I'm looking at then the bottom of page 2 of the staff report. To clarify this front facing garage door setback. To clarify this regulation, staff are proposing to state that the front entrance must be located a minimum of 1 meter in front of all front-facing garage doors in the RS7, et cetera, zones. And yet I thought we were is that consistent with what you described as being the front porch or the front door?
Your Worship, that's correct. The porch or the front door can be 1 meter ahead of the garage.
So the staff report at the bottom there,
The wording is unclear, and we tried to make it clearer with the diagram.
okay, on the diagram, got it. So I'm going to flip forward to page 2 of the bylaw itself. Again at the bottom. Nope, not at the bottom. It was, where was that one? Okay, F, Part 10, attached, the first story of the principal building, including covered porches meeting the requirements, and attached number 4 must be located at least 1 meter in front of any garage doors. And that's the provision you're talking about that wasn't adequately reflected by the staff report. Okay. And I don't want to edit the bylaw at this stage, but obviously we're not actually calling for the front door to be in front of the garage door. We're calling it to be further forward than the garage door, or that it be on a plane that's 1 meter closer to the street than the plane that the garage door is on. But in any case, thank you. I don't see any other questions. Councillor Zerillo.
I have a couple, but the first one is about the side garage, so just to carry on with that thought. So if you have a side entry garage, your front door is obviously going to be behind your garage, so are we conflicting, or is that one, they're not mutually exclusive?
In the RS10 and RS11 zones where we're proposing side-facing garages, there is an exception where the front door does not have to be in front of the garage for these 2 zones, and meeting other requirements, which is an 18-meter wide lot at a minimum.
And are there any safety concerns around side-facing garages if people are using their front door? Like, is there any safety concerns on that? Kids and...
Through your Worship, we haven't identified any concerns. It would be similar to other large lots where kids play on their driveway, a basketball court, or hockey on their own property. It would be regulated by the owners of the lot. And they're executive lots. We're creating these side-facing garages only on the largest lots in Coquitlam.
Yeah, I understand that. There are a lot of homes that are built with the side garage, but you're coming in and out of the front door right by the garage. That was my only reason to ask that question.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, just to add to that, the examples I've seen with a driveway in that configuration, usually they have, a concrete landing in front of the front door or sidewalk and that sort of thing that integrates into the driveway, but it may be at a different level, or it may have some other sort of landscaping or other provisions to make sure that there's a division between the 2.
And then I did have a question. I'm a big fan of continuous improvement, so I'm appreciative of the fact that you recognize there were some deficiencies in the current bylaw and you've brought them forward. But I wanted to ask the question, are there any specific upcoming developments that need this change that have instigated this amendment now? Like, are there some pending, waiting, that as soon as we pass this, they're going to come forward?
Your Worship, perhaps I can try to respond to that. What we're finding, I think this was mentioned in the staff report, we're finding as we're going further up the hill and more to the east, some of the sites are frankly more challenging with the grades and with the road layout that sometimes that requires curvilinear. What that means is just a street that sort of curves around and often follows the contour to access these steeper lands. What we were finding, or what the developers were finding, was with the lots on these curving streets, or maybe on a cul-de-sac bulb with a grade, to get the lot yield they were looking for, it just became very, very challenging to have the building set at those precise setback distances, as Michael was explaining, within that, the 2 meters of the front, 4 meter setback was just too constraining. And it was leading to some really difficult design outcomes for them. And so a number of the builders had come to us and raised this concern. We talked about some options. We said we would look at it. One option for them at that time was to go forward with a series of development variance permit applications. They chose not to do that at that time. They sort of massaged the designs they had. I think they worked with the lots that they could most easily deal with, on the expectation that we would be working on this zoning bylaw text amendment and coming forward to council with a recommendation to revisit this aspect of it. So I think if council supports this, this will enable those developers to get on with those subdivisions or those house designs that they like to see.
So there is some on hold right now waiting, or there are some, I should say.
Through the chair, I can't say precisely there's X number of lots sitting there waiting on the shelf for this development, but I do know there was builders coming to us raising this concern, asking for our feedback. There was a development variance permit route. They chose not to do that. We said we'd work through a text amendment approach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
In terms of the front setbacks, the front setback provision, I know this is kind of an odd case, but what if somebody wanted a very long front yard and didn't want a small backyard? It looks to me like we would allow them to put their house quite a ways back based on the wording here. Is that correct? Or is there something in there that would prevent somebody from moving their house way back?
Through your worship, the single-family zones also have a rear lot line setback, right. 6.2 meters. So you'd always have to maintain a certain distance. The lots that are created are generally not 200 or 300 feet deep.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any speakers to this item? Are there any speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any speakers to this item? Seeing none.
How long can I speak for?
Thank you for coming.
Raymond Nostein, Development Manager, Westfield Holdings, 666 Burrard. We're here tonight to lend our support to this bylaw change. It is simple and effective. It's responding to changing conditions on the Hill, but most importantly, it's still maintaining the original design goals of the bylaw, but doing it in a way that will be much more functional for staff, for council, and for the builders. Yeah. If I can answer one question that was asked about, are there builders waiting for this? I would suggest the answer is no, that everyone is continuing to move forward. But this is a great improvement that will allow for the flexibility as we get into the tougher lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zavillo.
Yeah, just that we had two on-table items, and if we're not having any speakers, do we have answers to the on-table items, or how does that work?
Okay. The correspondence.
Once that's done, then we can't get any new information. So do we have the answers to the questions that were on the on-table items?
No, staff don't normally reply to the correspondence we receive. We receive it, and if we have questions related to it, we'll ask the questions. Was there?
Oh, sorry. I just thought we were going to get.
Well, we often get 50 or 60 letters for a public hearing, and staff don't reply to all of the items. Well, it's just been pointed out, the opening line says, I want these questions answered and passed on to our city councillors and presented at the public hearing. Well, it has been presented to us at the public hearing, and they were passed on to the city councillors. And I assume that staff are preparing a reply to this It was received on Thursday, and there's probably a couple of days of staff time involved in drafting answers for these, but perhaps Mr. McIntyre can give us a quick response to some of them.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Yeah, we have received 2 pieces of correspondence. One is a letter from the Urban Development Institute expressing support for the proposed text amendments. The second is an email. This actually was part of an email chain from actually a Northeast resident is present this evening. And in that there was a number of questions asked at the time. What staff has done in the meantime has have contacted this individual directly, and perhaps Michael can speak to this further, and has had a discussion about these questions and these points, and I think resolved them to her satisfaction. But Michael, just I understand you had a phone conversation.
Through your worship, I've contacted Janet. We spoke via email. The issue is around clarity. Homes are not going to be 2 meters from the property line, and there was some confusion about what that 2 meter exception rule that was changing. We're not bringing homes closer to the street. We're actually pulling them further back. As well as there were some questions about setbacks on Coast Meridian. The homes along Coast Meridian are RS8 lots, which is a 4 meter setback. So are the RS7 lots. And if all her questions were not addressed, I see that she's in attendance. If we're willing to answer any other ones.
Okay. Well, for the folks at home, the letter we're discussing actually is from a Janet Klopp on Highland Drive. Could you state your name and address for the record?
Janet Klopp, 3440 Highland Drive. It would seem to me that this text amendment is one of the more practical and common sense text amendments that I have witnessed in these past few years. I am pleased to actually support this text amendment because I do believe we need to be putting the houses, siting the houses further back from the street if that's required. It seems that to have that kind of inflexibility on the mountainside with the contours, with the different contours of the land, different grades. It's funny that that ever happened, but I mean, there's lots of different ways that the mountain is being developed. In my particular area, it's more on a grid system, and further over along Partington Creek, it would make more sense to use the contour of the land to plan the streets across, so that you're not just going to put a straight line across it. I think it's more aesthetically pleasing, and I think it will allow for homeowners to actually enjoy the properties up there a lot more, and will create some more habitat, hopefully, if the lots are large enough to also allow some space around the buildings. I guess the only question I wondered was, if you do have a home at a certain setback from the front street, is there any provision for that being differentiated when you do have it with a garage on the side or on an angle?
Your Worship, I can respond to that if you like. On the larger lots where that is available, the setbacks are deeper than in the smaller lots. Michael, if you correct me, maybe I think it's 7.6 meters is the minimum setback in those zones? 8 meters. Yeah, so it is further back in that situation where there's side-facing garage. And
if they are that far back, does that, and the garage is on the side or even behind the home, does it really matter where it's, is there a regulation, I guess, for where the home is set back because of that, or does it make it closer to any of the side yard or backyard setbacks because there's a difference in where that garage is located?
Yeah, the side yard setbacks remain the same, and like was mentioned previously, there's a rear yard setback, a minimum setback, which locates the home away from the rear yard. So it depends on the topography and configuration and the locational context of that lot.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you so much. So I just had one other question. So there's no chance for the setback to be closer? Like, we're talking about it being at least 2, it's actually 4, right? Like, what are we talking about here in the restrictions? Because we're giving more flexibility, but we're not giving any more flexibility to come closer, are we?
No.
Through your worship, the front lot line setbacks in all zones is remaining the same.
Okay, thank you so much. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yep. Are there any other speakers to this item? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Ron Marr with Downline Ventures, office at Commerce Parkway in Richmond. Just wanted to say that, yes, we also support these changes. We have a current application going forward through, well, we've been zoned, but we are in the process of engineering design and that. Having taken these changes to the bylaw will not change our layout or increase our yield or anything, but it does mean that on a couple of our lots, we won't have to do quite as much earth moving and regrading, and the retaining walls don't have to quite be as high because it gives some flexibility. It eliminates a couple of the awkward situations. I think one of the plans showed the cul-de-sac bulb where you've got part of the lot fronting. That's a really awkward thing, and it really makes some crazy house designs and wastage, and it avoids that. And quite frankly, I think by avoiding those crazy juts of the house, the streetscape is going to be an improvement. So I do see this as a general improvement, not a huge change to whatever the public would see, but it's the subtle little things that take away the odd visual appendages on some house designs and just makes it more efficient. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this item? You know, we got to, for the third and final time, and then Mr. Nothing got up and
Jack Tromley at 23 Sumter Drive. Coquitlam, looking at the setbacks, and I was looking at obviously it's going to lengthen the driveways. Is there a certain bylaw in terms of angle of those driveways in? Will it increase the angle of that driveway coming down, or is there a certain bylaw to say you only have a certain degree on those driveways coming down because you're actually pushing the house back a bit?
Your Worship, really good Q&A. Yeah, there's, and I can't recall just offhand, but there is I believe under the building bylaw, there's a requirement for a maximum driveway grade coming off a street. Also with the subdivision designs, in that part of that review looks at where the proposed driveways are relative, and one of the considerations for transportation engineering staff is where those driveways are located relative to curves in the road and such, so it minimizes any potential traffic hazards. There's also a requirement for a certain driveway, a minimum driveway length, because you want to make sure that you have sufficient room in front of the garage to park a vehicle.
Just another quick question is, because I live in a driveway that's very steep, and we do get a lot of snow as well. I'm sure I get a lot of snow in Burke Mountain. Is there a possibility to look at requirements if there's a certain grade, to look at certain types of finishes on the driveway that would allow less slippage, or is that an option that the developer might look at? Just a thought.
Your Worship, typically we don't get into the finished material.
we're actually not allowed to.
Just that's why I'm asking. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. I think just by convention and practice, the exposed aggregate concrete, which tends to get a little more traction than just a flat finished concrete. It's something that, again, they look at it with the subdivision design and the building envelope location, because you don't want houses with extremely steep driveways. It's just, it's potentially dangerous. It's not very practical, and it's not very desirable either.
Okay, just want to, thanks very much.
That said, some of the steepest driveways I know of in Coquitlam are on a municipally developed subdivision near my house. Are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and last time. Seeing none, I'll declare this item and the public hearing closed. We'll be convening a council meeting in a few minutes once they reset tapes and do that sort of technical stuff.